Hello, franchise friends. It's Simon here from FranRec Recruitment. No, I'm not Harvey. I'm standing in for Harvey today as he pursues the growth of his fantastic coffee brand across the UK. So I'm looking after things today, and we're live. And today we're going to bring you the story, the franchising story. It's the UK franchising industry story. And we're going to just talk about some of the highlights of the show, of the survey, and what's been happening over the last 5 years. And I am absolutely delighted, overwhelmed, shocked to welcome Pip Wilkins, CEO of the British Franchise Association, who's going to really take us through some of those highlights. Pip, very warm welcome to you. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Dialing in. I'm over in Brussels at the moment, so we have our European Franchise Awards this evening with some really great UK brands represented as well. So yeah, excited for that. So apologies for making this a bit early for you.
No. Listen, don't worry. It's not a problem at all. It must be brilliant to network with your counterparts in Europe and be able to walk in with the survey under your arm and show them what we've been doing over here.
Funny enough, I did that earlier, and I was scrolling through and showing them the live thing. So I've got a few copies to send out to different countries from around Europe when I get back.
Brilliant, that's excellent. Well, listen, I mean, we're talking today about, as I said, the story of franchising. I mean, and I think for me, I mean, obviously, I've been in the industry for some years, and for me, this has got to be one of the most significant surveys that's ever been produced. I mean, I know there's been a 5-year gap, but I mean, what a gap it's been. I mean, we've seen everything, haven't we? We've seen, I've got a list here, it's that long. Obviously, we've seen COVID, Brexit, we've had interest rates going through the roof and inflation. And of course, most importantly, Chelsea have had more managers than anybody else in the Premier League.
Wow. There's just nothing to say on that. Nothing.
Pip's a Chelsea fan, everybody. But anyway, listen, I think it's fantastic, and it's a great opportunity to really dive into to some of the insights for the survey. I mean, as you know, Franchising Brand Stories is a show where we really encourage people to really get under the skin of any franchising brand they're interested in investing in, to get to know the journey and the story. And I think it's equally important as well, they get to understand and have a look at the industry that they're going to be operating as well. So it's great that we have you here to share the insights. So I have been very lucky, and our franchisee audience has been sharing some fantastic questions that they'd like to ask you. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to lead with these questions. Is that all right?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Brilliant. Okay. Here we go. First up then, so tell me a bit about the survey. How was the survey actually conducted?
Okay, so it is our, I think, 30-second industry survey. And basically, we used a company called BDRC. So they're an independent research company, and they've been the company that have done the survey for the BFA for as long as I can remember. In essence, the survey is research and insights from franchisors and franchisees. So we did an online survey to start off with, and then followed up with individual telephone interviews so that we could get further responses. But the key thing when we do this is to make sure we get a completely balanced response. So we're looking at insights from franchisor startups to larger, more established brands, and we're looking at franchisee interviews from those that are quite new to franchising, but right the way through to your larger multi-unit, multi-brand franchisees. Yeah. So it's a huge piece of work for us. Field work took around about 6 months. So we started in sort of August, September last year, and it ran right the way through to sort of January, February. And then obviously they've got to put together the figures for us. So it gives a real well-rounded, I guess, perspective of the industry. Yeah. We're going to obviously mention it a lot. So just to cover the kind of business categories that we look at. So we have hotel and catering. It's quite self-explanatory. It's hotels, coffee shops, fast food restaurants. Property services, which is things like estate and letting agents, as well as kind of cleaning franchises and gardening. Store retailing, which is everything from convenience stores to bathroom centres. Transport and vehicle, which is couriers, anything that touches a vehicle, so vehicle repairs, personal services. And there is a huge range in this category, with everything from care to kids activity and personal trainers to kind of pet services. And then we have business and communication services, which is like consultants, coaches, recruitment, accountancy, that kind of thing.
Wow.
It is really vast for us, and it's been a while since we've had the opportunity to do the survey, which is why we wanted to stay with the research company that we've used previously.
Yeah, longevity is really important, and they understand franchising as well, don't they? Which is massively important. So, I mean, listen, I think it's only fair at this point to point out the fact that this wouldn't have been possible without the support of NIC Group Services, and that has to be commended and recognised for sure. I mean, their commitment to franchising is superb, and I think that says a lot about them as a franchise business and their commitment and their collaboration.
Yeah, I mean,
as well.
John was on the board for a period of time, but he was also the chairman of the association. And, he said himself, he recognised how important it is for franchisors to have stats to benchmark themselves, but also for us to have stats to try and put out and tell the good story of franchising in the UK market. Where it's successful, churn rates, success rates, but also sharing, some of the challenges and stuff that we can see through that. But it's a good promotional tool for us.
Excellent. I mean, and that's really important. So really, it's a very, very forensic examination of the UK franchise industry. And I think that's really important because, look, there are so many facts and figures and things flying around out there in the industry. But if you're serious about investing in franchising, you want to know where we're at the moment as an industry and what the future trends are, because that's really going to help you going forward. Okay, look, let's dive into one of the questions that we have from our lovely audience of franchisees. So what are the key headline statistics? So well, tell me some numbers, baby.
there's a few. So tell me if I'm boring you. But probably the key one for us, and the one that we promote quite widely, is the contribution to the UK economy. So for us, that's grown from 17.2 billion when we did this in 2018 to 19.1 billion today. So it's a 12% increase. And I think it's one of the stats that really showcases the sector's resilience and the ability to adapt and innovate, particularly with the challenges that we've had. You pointed out some, but mainly, for us looking at the global pandemic. In terms of franchise systems, so the number of franchisors in the UK market, we've seen an increase from 935 systems in 2018 to just over 1,000. So it's 1,009 systems now. Startup costs for new units. And it's a difficult one to report on, Simon, because they're so substantial in terms of the variations that exist between different types of franchises and different sectors. But overall, the increase in mean startup costs went from 80, always up to 85,000 now, which is up from 56,000 in 2018. But the important thing to note, I think, is that the research also showed around about 60% of franchisors estimated that their initial investment would be less than 50,000. So it means that franchising is accessible with relatively modest, I can't say the word, modest startup costs. So there's lots of different opportunities for prospective franchisees.
Yeah, that's hugely important, isn't it? So obviously the scope and the choice has widened with more businesses coming in and adopting franchising, but the costs are more realistic as well. Because when you talk about franchising, to some people, they just think, oh, it's completely out of my reach. I don't have, $250,000, £500,000 to invest in a great big outlet, whatever. So I think that's really positive and certainly will bring in a lot of newer franchisee talent into the marketplace for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And then I think, moving on to looking at the number of franchise units. So again, we did see a net growth since the last survey, and it's a total of about 1,800 new units. So that's brought the total to just over 50,000 franchise units across the UK. Still around about 22-ish thousand franchisees, but that represents a compound growth rate of 0.6%. It is slower than we've seen in previous periods. But as you said, if you take COVID, the challenges that we had with Brexit, the ongoing cost of living, and the fact that we're a maturing market now in the UK, it's still really positive growth.
Yeah, and also credit to the franchisors as well. What they're doing is they're building the scaffolding around their existing franchisees in times of trouble. And they're saying, right, okay.
And I think, that will come up when we talk a bit about multi-unit stuff later on. But final headline stat for me is the notable employment growth. So we're up to 770,000 people now employed in franchising. About half of those are in full-time employment. But that for me is where we can use this stat to really showcase that franchising plays a vital role in job creation, and we are outpacing small businesses outside of franchising.
Brilliant. I mean, so there's a really strong message out there, not only for people that are looking at investing in a franchise, so the longevity and the resilience is there. But I think the wider business community can learn a lot from our industry as well, can't they? They can learn how to become resilient and how to really future-proof their businesses. So a lot to learn there indeed. Okay, thanks for that, Pip. Some really interesting numbers there.
Just before you dive on, Simon, there is a question in the chat. So Katrina Newman, hi Kat, how are you? Has asked about the 1,009 systems and where does that number come from?
Okay.
So Kat, that's a combination of industry research. So from our perspective as the BFA, we need to set the number of franchise systems when we go to do the research. So we pick up with banks, solicitors, franchise consultants, people in the franchising sector to find out the new brands entering the market. So those are added in, but we also look at which brands have withdrawn from franchising between the periods of doing the survey. So a lot of that is, I guess, from our perspective, internal research to make sure that we know the number of franchise systems and that's accurate.
Yeah, sure. And I guess from the BFA's point of view as well, you would have had a good gauge of those numbers very early on because of the number of people approaching you about looking at franchising their business, looking about coming into the franchising industry, I'm sure, because you've always been very much, at the sharp end of those initial conversations about that. Okay.
Cool.
Let's have a look here. Okie dokie. Right. So another question from our lovely franchisee audience is, how do franchisees typically perform financially compared to independent businesses? Now, this is the key one, really, isn't it? I mean, what does the survey tell us about the difference between a business that's started up and operated under a franchise compared to a non-franchise startup?
Well, we've got different stats, Simon. So the average turnover now for franchise units stands at just shy of 400,000. And that figure's been relatively consistent for the last 10 years. So again, it highlights the robustness of franchising despite the kind of broad economic challenges. As a short aside, the average franchisee turnover figure that we quote, so the 400,000, does exclude franchise units with a turnover of more than 2 million, because we want to ensure that the average figures we represent aren't distorted by the exceptionally high performers, such as the larger kind of multi-unit, multi-brand franchisees.
Yeah.
Franchisee satisfaction is at an all-time high. We're at 82% of franchisees describing their relationship with their franchisors as either satisfactory or better. And in addition, 60% of franchisees feel that the franchising model has met their expectations, demonstrating the sector's ability, I guess, to provide viable opportunities for the majority.
Yeah.
Profitability wise, franchise systems are saying that they are, 89% of franchisees, I guess, are reporting profitability. The figure is slightly lower than the levels that we had in 2018. It was at 93% then, but it is still indicating a high success rate for franchise businesses.
Good.
And additionally, units that have been operating for more than 5 years are demonstrating even stronger performance. So 60% of those are saying that they are achieving high levels of profitability. Overall, more than half of franchisees now are turning over more than 250,000, and we've seen a growing number of franchisees surpassing that 500,000 turnover mark too. So I think franchisees are doing really well. Don't know off the top of my head, without diving into the journal to check the figure, how that's outperforming in terms of non-startup businesses. But we do know, when you look at failure rates, the number of people that are still around in franchising is much better than it is in a non-franchise business.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's key, isn't it? I think one of the interesting stats and the encouraging statistics you mentioned there, not least the profitability, but the expectations as well on franchisees. And that says a lot about the industry. They're not going out there overselling, and really they are being honest and fully disclosed in the conversations they're having with the franchisees and giving them really realistic figures, performance figures and everything else. And I think that's encouraging for sure. And equally, the longevity, franchisees that have been in business for over 5 years are delivering, improved profitability and growth as well. because there is, you and I both know, there is a natural life cycle to a franchisee, isn't there?
Yeah.
You know, it's, you've got to have the energy to start off with, and then you get into the groove, and then things start to work properly. But it's really encouraging to see that sort of longevity and sustainability for franchising, for sure. I just want to put up, I've just managed to find out how to put these messages up. I do apologise to everybody. I'm not as good at using this as my friend Harvey. So you might get to look at my Amazon shopping list or my Netflix account. But I've just found this in the chat, and I just wanted to put this up. It's a lovely chap called Harvey Tuck, who says, it's great to be here. And thanks for stepping in, Simon. You are doing a great job, and fantastic to hear the wonderful Pip. I am busy promoting our coffee brand and will be back wearing the hat next week. Well, fantastic. Great to hear from you, Harvey. And I won't be putting a hat on. I'm not going to steal your thunder in any shape or form, but it's great that you're able to join us here. Is there any other questions in the chat there, Pip, that you want to pick up on?
Yeah, there's a few different ones. So Mark said there was an old piece of research by Warwick, NatWest, by Warwick, David Story and NatWest, about general startups, saying that 20% stop trading in the first 5 years and 80% not around after 5 years. So that's just a stat in terms of non-franchise businesses.
Okay.
There's another question, I think, which we'll touch on in a minute when we get on to kind of sector stuff in relation to transport and vehicle services and store retailing being down. And is this a general trend or other factors?
Okay, that's good. Excellent. Well, let's push on. I'm sure we'll cover that in our other questions. So we talked about performance. Now the $64 million question for any prospective franchisees. I mean, which sectors are showing the most growth and stability as well in 2024?
The most significant expansion has been in the personal services and hotel and catering sectors. Between them now, they account for more than half of the franchise systems in the UK.
Okay.
But while they have led in growth, we have seen small declines in other areas. They're not massive. They're still maintaining a strong market presence. But if you look at store retailing as an example, you know, as online shopping continues to grow, we are seeing losses on the high street, and that impacts franchising as well as the high street generally.
Yeah.
But, you know, from a franchising perspective, we've seen a rise in brands like convenience stores moving to the franchise model because they want to bring a more localized approach to the way in which they're doing business. So, you know, we've seen Co-op come into franchising. We've got One Stop. You know, there are lots of brands now looking at franchising because they really want that kind of local business person.
Yeah.
I think as the demographic landscape of the UK shifts, we respond to different things that are happening. So if you take the aging population as an example, the franchising sector addressed some of those pressing challenges. So as there was an increase in demand for domiciliary care, we saw franchising respond to that. And we've seen huge growth in dom care businesses. If you look at Home Instead, they're one of the biggest home care brands in the UK. They expanded their operations massively over the past decade. They started with, I think it was 18 units in 2007, and they've now got more than 250 franchisees around the UK. So they've really responded to, you know, the aging population wanting to be in their own home.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've seen the growth in children's activity sector and those franchises, which is, you know, I think it was a survey that highlighted that 73% of primary schools might not be able to maintain their current kind of physical activity and after school sports offerings because of cuts with government funding. But franchising has offered a lifeline. They're going in, they're providing these services. It's standardized programs that can be easily replicated. So the children's activity sector are starting to plug the gap where there is opportunities where funding has been cut. So they're responding there. So I think franchising is doing really, really well in picking up challenges that are coming, you know, from a government perspective. Yeah. And responding quickly. And because you're growing with, you know, highly skilled individuals, that have a passion for the service in their local area, it's making a big difference to the way we move forward.
I think you're being very generous there about picking up the pieces. I mean, some of it is sweeping up the mess, isn't it? Let's be quite honest. That's been created by government.
Live, Simon. I was saying it nicely.
Listen, I can say what I want. I'm self-employed, but no, you're absolutely right. Education, care sector. These are all things that franchising is really supporting and then really delivering value services to the end users, and it's fantastic to see that. So within personal services sector, then we're looking at domiciliary care, the children's activity
fitness, so we saw a massive boom in gyms, particularly when they were talking about obesity and all of that. And I think that's where the franchising model, it pops up quickly, and we them grow hugely in their first kind of 2 or 3 years, and then pause while they get the model right internally, really stabilize systems and drive franchising forward. But I think it's the franchising model is that local business person. So it's not just about buying a business. They've got the care and consideration in their local community, so they want to make a difference in their own right. And I think that's what makes franchising special, but it's also what makes it successful.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed for that. If you see something in the chat, I said I can't multifunction sadly, but if you see something in the chat,
I've got to pick this one up, Simon. So Anne-Maria Martin from Diddy Dancers just popped a note in the chat, and she's saying, and one of the things that they're doing now is mixing the youngest and eldest into intergenerational sessions. So I know that the Diddy Dance have been working with Teslom, so you can see like the power of franchising collaboration, where they're going in and running their Diddy Dance sessions in care homes, which is fantastic.
That is absolutely amazing, isn't it? Collaboration between two franchising brands, and listen, that is
franchising.
Sorry. Okay, brilliant. Okay, let's move on to here we go. Here's a really interesting one that came in that I thought I wanted to ask you about. What trends are shaping the future of franchising? Now, we've talked about the growth sectors, but let's look at things like the demographics, the profile characteristics of franchisees, average age, backgrounds prior to coming into franchising. I mean, what are we seeing, and what has the survey been reporting back on?
So loads of different stuff. So some of the key characteristics, the average age of franchisees has increased. So it's up to 48 from 44 back in 2018. So it's only up 4 years. But the age trend is particularly noticeable for us when we looked at the number of new recruits that came in that period. So that average age rose from 40 to 49. We are great news, and super pleased to be able to report this. We're seeing a much more balanced gender distribution, with women now making up 40% of the overall franchisee population, which is a marked increase from 2005, where only 20% of franchisees were female. Among new recruits, 34% are women, which is up 16% from nearly 2 decades ago. So the shift is showing that there is a growing appeal of franchising to female entrepreneurs. And I think a lot of that has been driven by opportunities in the personal services sector, which are attracting more females into franchising.
Excellent.
Disappointingly, the proportion of younger franchisees, so those that are under the age of 30, has sharply declined from the survey in 2018. So in 2018, we were reporting 18% of franchisees. That's now down to 7%. Okay. While it does seem really bad when you look at it at first glance, it is important to recognise that 2018 was a irregularity in our figures. So the 7% is more consistent with the historical trends, but it's disappointing for me. And it highlights that there is so much more that we as the BFA, and actually we as an industry, need to do to educate the franchisees of tomorrow.
100%. I really agree with that. And, if Harvey was here, he will be saying exactly the same thing. I mean, he's passionate about getting younger people into franchising, and there is more that we can do as an industry for sure, not just in terms of how we communicate, but how we facilitate young people coming into franchising. I mean, we've had some brilliant stories on on franchising brand stories where people like Nigel from the Bargain Group spotted somebody with a real passion, a real drive, but they didn't have the money. So what he said was, listen, forget about that. Let's get you in. And they put a shared ownership scheme together, which allowed them to pay back the initial costs of the franchise. So as an industry, I think we need to think more creativity, but it's the lifeblood. I mean, we can learn so much from the younger generation, and I think it's brilliant if we can get more of them into franchising to really drive the business forward.
We've got some phenomenal case studies and testimonials of this. So through the awards program, we've had for a few years now the next generation category, which are for franchisees under the age of 30. And what we're finding is we're seeing people that come into franchising by accident. So they find a brand, they find a real passion for that brand and they love it. And then they are supported on a transition, to go from, a worker to a kind of trainee franchisee, working within a franchise, and then going on eventually to own the franchise system in their own right. We want to see more of that, but the plan for us in the year ahead, we've got a Young Guns campaign planned. So a big marketing campaign to push forward, and lots of things to do. So we're doing a pilot project at the moment that we've been working on with the University of Roehampton for a while. And we're hoping that will come to fruition in the next quarter to roll out during the course of 2025. But, it's the tip of the iceberg for us. It's a start.
Yeah, good. And for fear of being blown up in my chair by Harvey, we are also doing something at Franchising Brand Stories. We are having the content that we produce is being shared on a university course as well as case studies as part of the syllabus. So, I mean, it's something we're really passionate about, and it's great to hear that the BFA is aware and is fully committed to addressing it.
Yeah, we work with, obviously we work with Venture Marketing Group on the franchise exhibitions, but they also have careers fairs. And again, Anne-Marie's just popped something in the chat saying a group of franchisors are looking at careers fairs to focus on the younger demographic. That's something we want to do, is go into some of these exhibitions and really push forward from a BFA perspective. This is what franchising is, and here it is as an option.
Yeah.
Some of the other shifts then, Simon, so across the board, from a COVID perspective, I think that pushed franchising into a new area of digital engagement. We were a little bit behind the curve, but we all stepped up. We worked out Zoom and lives like this. But what we saw is then that online comms between franchisors and franchisees have increased. But it has meant that we've seen a slight decline in face-to-face, and actually a decline in phone conversations where people are obviously opting for online instead. Yeah. But that also coincided with a shift, as you would expect, in both franchisors and franchisees working from home offices. So in 2015, 40% of franchisors and 29% of franchisees, excluding store retailing and hotel and catering concepts, they operated from a home office. That's risen now to 56% and 42% respectively. So we've seen a lot moving into sort of home offices, as you would expect.
Yeah. And that's something, sorry to interrupt, that's something that was come through from some of the stories that we've been featuring as well. The fact that people are a lot more comfortable now working from home, and the technology is there has opened up franchising to a lot more people, particularly people that have got commitments, taking the kids to school in the morning, pick them up in the afternoon, they can work from home. And I think having that mindset now is brilliant. And I think it's really facilitated the growth of franchising as well. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, well, flexibility is the thing that everyone wants now, isn't it? Yeah. So it's got to be acknowledged in the right way. So D&I is another kind of area. So we did quite a lot. As you know, we did a week to kind of raise the awareness. And it was one of the things that we put in the survey, because we wanted to see what proportion of franchisors were kind of making notable strides in integrating D&I into their business practices. Yeah. So about a quarter of franchisors view it as a top priority. So they are actively embedding comprehensive policies into ops manuals and employment documents. And that proactive approach, I think, reflects a strong commitment to fostering more inclusivity in the business environment. Half of franchisors, though, do consider it as a considerable priority, and they are working on it. They're looking at training programs and how they change organizational culture. Franchisees too are looking at it. So I think with something like 35% of franchisees are prioritizing it. But there is about 38%, I think it was, that acknowledge that it is important, but face practical challenges. So limited applicants, constraints because it's a smaller or a family-run business, which can make kind of the implementation of D&I a bit more complex. But I think gradually as a sector, we're overcoming challenges, and more franchisors and franchisees are working to address through the issues and enhance their training and strategic recruitment to make sure they are fully inclusive as brands.
Hallelujah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's brilliant, isn't it, that franchising is adopting that pathway, because it's going to have an impact. It'll have an impact on the customers. It's an important consideration, isn't it? It's an important consideration for any prospects as well that are looking at coming in, about finding out what the franchisor's view and standpoint is, and what are they doing to support a more diverse and inclusive society and workforce. So that's fantastic. Pip, thank you very much indeed. Is there anything else you want to add to that? I feel like we've
no, I think verbally, like, you know, verbal diarrhea out all the stats that I've got in terms of characteristics for now.
Listen, you're doing a fantastic job. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, let's just move on a little bit here. So the reported benefits of being a franchisee. I mean, look, you know, we all know, we've all seen we've all heard about the figures in terms of what franchising can do for individuals in terms of profitability and the average sales, et cetera, et cetera. But is there one thing that the survey is saying that franchisees are really highlighting as being the main benefit of being part of a franchise network?
Yeah, 1000%. The primary benefit is the comprehensive support package provided by the franchisors. It's why they join. It's the extensive training, the operational guidance, and the access to established systems. So the support part is crucial. 73% of franchisees have said that's what they buy in for. It's helping them navigate daily challenges and maintain brand standards. Another key advantage that they're highlighting is the standardization of products and services.
Yes.
So for 64% of franchisees, this consistency it enables them to enhance brand trust, but they say it reduces the risks associated with launching a venture on their own. You know, so they want that standardization in place, and they want the support infrastructure. Also, kind of a front runner is the marketing position, due to the brand recognition. So 62% of franchisees believe that it attracts more customers. It gives them a competitive advantage because they've got those structured marketing strategies and operational support to boost the success of their own local marketing efforts. And adhering to quality standards. So knowing that there is a franchisor behind them that will help maintain high service levels and differentiate themselves from local competitors. So 58% of franchisees are saying adherence and customer satisfaction provides them with a competitive edge. Excellent. So quite a lot there, but you know, overwhelmingly for me, it comes down to the support infrastructure, and that's what they're saying.
Yeah, and that was one of the other questions that was going to ask you about how important is the role of the franchisor support in franchisee success. It has to be, you know, happy, successful franchisees is what you are looking for as a franchisor, and the support plays a massive part of that, not just initial support, but obviously ongoing support as well.
Yeah, but when you look at the ongoing support, you know, these figures for me, I found, you know, quite outstanding. So I think it's something like 85%. I don't have the figure in front of me, I'm guessing now. It was 85% of franchisees were in touch with their franchisor at least monthly. And it was something like 30% communicate with their franchisor daily. So you're talking high levels of engagement if you look to buy into a franchise concept, because franchising, as we both know, doesn't work. If franchisor and franchisee aren't aligned, they're not going to be successful. So it's making sure that, you know, they are on the end of the phone, they are supporting. So if you're looking at a franchise concept, know that your franchisor is readily available, I think is the message that comes out of this.
100%. And also it's about having boots on the ground, isn't it, as well? And again, I just going to go back to one of the shows that we did recently with Caremark. I mean, their ratio of support staff to franchisees is phenomenal. It really is. And I think that's showing a massive impact, both for people that are looking at coming into their network, because they're asking those questions, and the performance as well. And these are not just people that go around with a clipboard and a pen. These are people that have the opportunity to really impact on the performance of the business, you know, business performance managers. Yeah.
And it's not just the discussions that they have day to day about, you know, what you need. Nearly 100%, it's way over 90% of franchisors say that their franchisees actively talk to them about their long-term business plans. And for me, I think there's been a huge shift. So, the relationship between franchisee and franchisor was hugely strengthened by COVID. I think, in order to weather the storm, there was huge collaboration in franchising from, us to franchisors, from franchisors to franchisees, from franchisees to consumers. But, for over 90% of franchisees be talking to their franchisor about their long-term strategic plan, I think is really important.
Yes. And again, that goes back to the point of, okay, everybody had to switch off and do the reset. I think good franchisors are constantly doing that anyway and looking at the network and see how they can improve things. But certainly that was the opportunity. And we've seen how franchisors have built the scaffolding around their franchisees, existing franchisees in the network, and really supported them. Fantastic. I'm really pleased about that. I'm passionate about franchise support, as you know, and boots on the ground is my big thing for sure. Excellent. Thanks very much indeed for that, Pip. Okay, moving along then. Okay, it's going to put you on the spot a little bit. So what franchise models are offering the best opportunities for scalability in 2004? When I say franchise, I mean, there are different ways you can get into franchising. Of course, you can buy a resale, you can buy a virgin territory, you can go in with an area, a development agreement. So you are committed to opening a certain number of outlets, for example.
Sorry,
we're live. I don't care. This is the only live podcast about franchising. All right, and we've just proved it.
Sorry,
please.
So I think, for me, multi-unit ownership is something that we've been talking about for a while. So, when you look at the survey this time, there wasn't a massive change in the number of franchisees that ran multiple units. For me, the key statistic that came out of it was the trend to the number of units that a multi-unit franchisee had. So the mean figure was, 8.8% or something in 2018. That's risen to 11.5%. So that's highlighting that there is an increase in franchisees managing larger portfolios. It showcases that already existing, multi-unit franchisees are in a prime position to acquire exiting franchisees, and they're purchasing resale opportunities. But we're also witnessing a shift, as the franchising model continues to mature in the UK. So we asked the question, what are you planning by way of resales in the coming year? And at least 66% of franchisors said they're planning to offer at least one unit as a resale in the coming year. And that's the highest it's been in almost 20 years, which does show that the role of resales in franchise management is going up. So franchisors need to have the processes and the plans in place to support franchisees with exit. For me, I think, we've got work to do. And I said this when we launched the survey stats, is we need to put in place more training for franchisors to make sure that they have strong, robust resale valuation processes. So we're going to be looking at some training for 2025.
Okay, no, that's good. And I think have the conversation early on. I mean, again, it's something that's been picked up. Why not have the conversation about exit routes when you initiate a conversation with a franchisee when they come on board? I mean, get to know what their plans are, 5, 7, 8 years, whatever it may be. But that's really interesting that the maturity of the industry and the resales. Do you think that's going to attract a different type of investor? I'm not going to use the word. I mean, people obviously said, look, franchising is not for buying a job. But, if you buy an existing franchise as a resale, you have got that income replacement a lot faster, haven't you, than you would do if you were buying a virgin territory, a greenfield territory. So do you think that's going to generate a different profile of investor or person coming into franchising?
Yeah, I really think it will. We're structuring our education ourselves. So we have our online prospect certificate. We are in the process now of looking at how we redo that and modernize it. And it won't just be this is how you can, invest in a franchise. It will have key research journeys. So I'm looking to invest in a franchise startup greenfield site. I'm looking to buy a resale opportunity, key considerations. And then I'm looking at becoming a multi-unit franchisee. I want to build an empire. But I just think as franchising matures, resales are going to become more and more prevalent, and it's the franchisor's mindset that needs to change. Because when you look at it, if you're buying in and you're investing more capital to buy a resale opportunity, the franchisor needs to be able to support people of that caliber in a different way to the way they support the franchisees that they had 10 years ago. So it's a mindset shift from a franchisor perspective in how they're going to manage those kind of people that want to build these bigger businesses. We know that there's challenges when a franchisor gets to 10, 15 franchisees and they have to build the support infrastructure. They're going to have to be able to support a franchisee to build a multi-unit platform where they've got to have the same economies of scale. So they need to know how to recruit and build a finance team or an operational team to support the number of multi-units that they're getting.
Yeah, and again, that has implications of the type of support that's being offered as well, isn't it? It's more business performance focused. It's about focusing on driving these individuals that have come in, bought a resale at a higher investment level. Their expectations are going to be a bit different as well, which I completely understand. So real challenges there, but opportunities.
Yeah, 100%.
For sure. Okay. Let's talk a bit about franchisee satisfaction levels, because again, I know it's always been one of the highlighted. 5 years of trials and tribulations. I mean, what are we looking at in terms of the franchisee satisfaction level with their franchisors, having come out of COVID and everything else?
Well, COVID was interesting because actually we had some really good stats on that in terms of the bounce back rates. I think it was like 89% of franchisors expect things to improve in the coming year. And franchisee wise, it was something like 60% are at now better trading levels than they were pre-COVID. But for me, what stands out, we touched on the 89% franchisee satisfaction earlier, is, we're not seeing huge forced churn in franchising. So we have seen a rise in voluntary churn, which is the bit that shows there are a growing number of franchisees choosing to exit. And that correlates with the stuff, maturing franchise sector, more people opting to resell and realize their return on investment. But the great number for me is the forced churn rate. And that's now less than 2%. And that's 2% of people that are exiting due to business closure, which shows that there is a resilience in the sector and there is evidence that there is effective franchisor support systems. And when you look at that forced churn rate, it's been less than 5% now for more than 20 years. And I think that's a stat we need to talk more about and promote more as people in the franchising sector.
And again, it goes back to the recruitment process as well, doesn't it? Making sure that you are recruiting people, awarding franchising, all of these words that we really need to be using a lot more of, rather than just selling it to anybody, recruiting it properly, because the good recruitment is at the heart of any successful business, any successful relationship, for sure.
Yeah, and we will be talking a lot more, Simon, about the franchisee satisfaction results. So, we've got the high level stat in this survey, but we work with WorkBuzz, as you know. So WorkBuzz do franchisee satisfaction surveys for brands that are going through either accreditation or re-accreditation with the BFA, and it's people that want to enter the awards. And I think we've got a record number. So there's some 140 odd franchisors will have gone through the franchisee satisfaction survey this year. So we're going to have some great stats to share with the membership at the annual conference. Not plugging it, but it's the 7th of November in case you haven't booked your place. I want some information on that.
No shameless plugging on this show, please. Oh, that's brilliant. Listen, Pip, I know you need to dash off very shortly, but I just wanted to ask you one more question, if that's all right with you. Unless there's something else in the chat that you want to pick up on, but I want to find out. I guess for me, well, not just for me, for the people that we've been hearing from. I mean, how are people finding franchise opportunities? Has the survey been able to tell us anything about that in terms of?
Absolutely, they're all coming through the BFA website. No, so we look at different things. So it's about what franchisees do. So I think it's like 50%. Only look at one brand before they make their choice. On average, they do evaluate 2.19 brands. So they are making early decisions. So I think, from a franchisor perspective, responding to that, you've got to have a compelling presentation when a candidate approaches you. But where they're looking, it's various channels. So we get a lot, and it's quite high in terms of the referrals from friends and relatives and stuff, which is something like 15%. From franchisor websites is around about 10%. Recommendations from existing franchisees, 7%. A good 22%, so nearly a quarter, look at talking to us from a BFA perspective before they make contact. But most new franchisees, 66%, are coming out of prior employment, and 41% are specifically seeking franchise opportunities. So that's what they're looking at. They're coming out of business generally and going, that's where I want to look.
Oh, that's interesting, because maybe there is one of the myths, I guess, it's for people that are looking at sort of close on to retirement, that are looking to invest their retirement income or whatever it is, but it's not.
No, they're coming. 66% come from prior employment, and 41% actively go, hey, I'm looking at a franchise opportunity. And I think, it's 60, 61, 62% are starting a business from scratch rather than buying resale opportunities. So we know about 40% are resales.
Okay. And social media is playing a massive part in finding.
Yeah, I think we'll see a growth in that. So we obviously do our own recruitment and benchmark survey, again, with WorkBuzz, that we do annually. And we can see there the trends. So, websites, franchisor websites are key, but more and more is being done through social media channels, specifically LinkedIn and Facebook.
Yeah.
But, you've got some of the TikTok legends around the world. So
I don't even know how to switch that one on, I'm afraid.
I'm working on it. The thing is, Simon, I've never had the rhythm. So, when they go TikTok, I'm the one that holds the camera or tries.
Listen, I feel terribly guilty for taking you away from what you were doing today, but I really genuinely appreciate you taking some time out. You're in Brussels. You're representing the British franchise industry, and thank you very much for that, because we really do appreciate it.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Your hard work.
There's some really nice comments in the chat that I missed at some stage, but lots of people just sort of talking about, encouraging the next generation. Mark Scott really quite rightly pointed out that, the target, and it's been similar, the average age of franchisees has always been around 40. So, maybe we've got a lot to do in targeting people in their mid to late 30s.
Yeah. And
like my age, basically.
Oh, that's fantastic. Listen, apologies to everybody if I haven't been able to get your chat on the screen. As I said, I was just a bit worried about getting the technology, but we will have a look through the comments, of course, and reply to all of them. But listen, Pip, can I just say thank you very, very much indeed. I really appreciate your time and effort, and I genuinely hope that people have found this interesting. I know that people that are looking at investing in franchising, that what we've been talking about is going to be really useful as part of their due diligence and research process, just as getting to know the individual brand story is, getting to know the industry and the trends and the opportunities is as well. So I thank you so much. I have a fantastic evening at the EFF Awards, is it?
It is the EFF Awards. So keep your fingers crossed. 4 UK brands.
Good stuff. Well, listen, I'm going to finish up by saying thank you again. Thank you for everybody that's joined us. If you click the QR code in the top of your screen, you can catch the full replay. And I can't remember what's on next week, but I know Harvey's got a fantastic show on Tuesday at 5:15. So please join us then. But listen, once again, thank you very much, and safe travels to you, Pip, and all the best to the BFA and the team.